He kindly reminded me not to regret letting him leave today. As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes looked completely hollow, then tightly squeezed. At this moment, Wendy seemed quite puzzled. He really didn't expect that I wasn't interrogating a criminal, but rather seeking help. Just as Wendy was about to leave, I told Wendy that I would remember him. Then I took the keys out of my pocket. I will keep my promise and exonerate him, but I didn't dislike his idea. In fact, I completely agreed. This is exactly the same as my plan. As a hunting dog that will inevitably seek revenge for the family, this will also be the only way to eliminate hatred. That identity can easily be forgotten. In the end, you just need to wait for the right moment. The Patriarch of Baskerville will become your scapegoat. Hearing this, my expression instantly darkened. He immediately shouted at me to shut up. Wendy seriously said to selflessly give all your current rights and the honors you've created here to the Baskerville clan leader. In order not to draw the attention of the common people, you must also hide your identity and strength at the Yasna Central Academy of the Empire, because the people there are about your age. The ultimate consequence I will face is their loathing. Moreover, even Baskerville will view me as a target of betrayal. I understand this situation better than anyone else, so I asked him what measures he would take. How should I continue moving forward from now on? He believes that although I have used the most ruthless means to capture the most powerful criminals to establish authority, thinking long-term, I will incite the hatred and anger of the common people. Once I gain a power stronger than Baskerville in this city, the people will no longer welcome me as they do now. After that, I questioned Wendy, who had served beside Baron Bino, because only I know his identity, coming from the wealthiest merchant family, and he will play an important role in my future revenge. Yet even if he confirmed my methods of enforcement, but pointed out its shortcomings, in addition, it already has a body of steel, ordinary attacks can't harm me at all. Once I eliminate the heirs of the 7 indigenous clans, I will begin to enact new laws. Then, based on the strongest evidence, I will sentence everyone from the indigenous families. Finally, he lies quietly on the ground to be crushed by a cart. This does not mean the boy has masochistic tendencies. It's because all the nobles in the world want to kill him. Fortunately, after the glutton absorbed the corpse of the Hell Rhino, it unexpectedly gained the skill of A-level toughness. Wendy confirmed my answer. At this moment, I smiled wickedly. Then I raised his chin and said, "Please tell me the reasons you deem correct." The first thing the boy does when he gets up is gargle with concentrated sulfuric acid. Then he uses foot-soaking water from 1982 to take care of his skin. No matter which side you choose, it all means the same. In any case, it's a dead end either way. So this time, he would rather believe in the righteousness of the governor. He doesn't want to get involved in actions that violate the law. And my first question is whether my forced governance is correct. If it could be applied to legitimate and compliant transactions, he would undoubtedly become an unparalleled financial expert. He might even influence the direction of the global economy. Wendy bit her lip, deep in thought, faced with such a difficult dilemma. But if he couldn't answer, today would be a day he'd regret for the rest of his life. Long before capturing Wendy, I had already investigated his background. He possesses business acumen that ordinary people lack. They were used to seeing this kind of thing. So I made a proposal. If he could answer my question, all his crimes would be absolved, and he could leave. Why was everyone else executed that night except him? I immediately explained. The reason is simple, because I needed some clues from you. But Wendy, who had undergone rigorous training, would rather die than surrender. And this city will become one of the most prosperous cities. The scene shifts. I arrived at the underground prison where the prisoners were held, and at this moment, the one standing before me was Wendy, Baron Pino's assistant. But he was very confused. And Vicky was greatly shocked when he saw the new laws I had written. He really didn't expect that a mere 15-year-old kid could come up with dozens of rigorous laws. Thus, as long as I serve as the governor here for a day, the probability of violating the laws could truly drop to 99%. Without new laws being enforced, the nobles I've stepped on will definitely do everything they can to rise again. So in the following days, I immersed myself in studying the laws every day. And since the exploitation by the nobles has been curbed, the quality of life for the common people has improved. Even the employment rate has leveled with major cities. Although this barely met my expectations, in reality, the city's prosperity is just an illusion on the surface. Since then, people have spread a saying, the new ruler is both a demon and an angel. Demon refers to the ruthless punishment I imposed on the traitors. Angel, because with my arrival, the nobles no longer dare to openly exploit the commoners. I've uncovered them all in the past few days. Upon hearing this, the 7 of them gradually turned pale with fear. After all, they never imagined they'd end up like this. In the end, I seized all their existing assets. and sentenced 3 generations of their family for betraying the nation, hoping to grant them 5 more years, to have another son to carry on the family line. The legal decree is a sacred covenant. I resolutely rejected their request, as for all the laws they previously violated, and have them intervene in the investigation. In the days that followed, the 7 major indigenous families no longer protested. Instead, they knelt at the door every day begging. I showed great mercy, must accept the sanctions of the law without exception. As for all the anti-epidemic plays, I ripped them all apart and threw them in the trash can. In the end, I also told him that I would report everything to the royal family. In fact, they are each other's only flesh and blood. But I clearly warned the 7 indigenous families. The royal family despises the act of slave trading the most. Their sons are also the instigators of the heads. Thus, anyone who violates this decree. Additionally, several businesses were reduced to ashes overnight. However, the leaders of the 7 indigenous families were not satisfied. One of them, fearing repercussions, wrote a protest of 10,000 words. Because at 2:30 a.m. every day, 7 heads appear beneath the goddess. I must complete the consumption before the pit bull knights arrive to search here. I need to leave this place of conflict. As for what happened that night, it quickly reached the ears of the common people. Everyone who participated in the slave trade had their limbs severed and 3 fingers cut off. At this moment, I have already cleared out an underground business involved in slave trading. Next, it's time for the feast for the glutton. As I lift a green cloth, lying beneath it is the already dead A-class hell rhino. There's no time to waste. It turns out this is a new decree from the newly appointed governor. No matter who it is, as long as orders are given, there must be brutal and severe punishments. And I intend to use him to rescue all the nobles who are hiding behind and exploiting the common people. This city indulges in arson, murder, and looting but never commits crimes. Yet the ordinary people live here in peace and prosperity. What's even more bizarre is that, at 2:30 a.m. every day, under the Statue of Liberty, there are 7 barrels filled with heads. He left here. So next, I will begin my true purpose for coming here. I lifted a piece of fabric. What appeared before my eyes was the A-rank magical creature, the Hell Rhino, captured at the auction. He glanced back at me. It seems like he's a bit reluctant to part with me, but even if he accepts me, his own family might see him as a traitor. In the end, after he said a very thank you in his barbarian language. After hearing this, the Manchu girl was very excited. She suddenly blurted out several sentences in her dialect. Although I can speak a little, it's still difficult for me in this listening test. As the girl was about to leave, yet here I am, a human, who actually saved him. Thanks to a few phrases I learned about their language during my past life battling the barbarians. I explained everything that had just happened here to him. I also hope that after he goes back, he can let the past go and that he can still let him leave here now. He was still frightened, curling up in the corner. It seems that this barbarian girl has indeed suffered greatly here. But upon learning that I saved him, his originally terrified expression turned to confusion. After all, humans and barbarians are supposed to be enemies. Quickly healed under the effect of the potion, the injuries were instantly restored. At the same time, the barbarian girl, feeling her strength returning, woke up at that moment. But when she saw me, a human, then, I took a red potion from my waist. This was because I had shown an outstanding performance during my graduation exam. The advanced healing potion that the instructor rewarded me. I immediately poured it into the mouth of the barbarian girl. Her body, which was previously covered in wounds. At this moment, her body was extremely weak. If she wasn't treated in time, she would soon pass away with a final twitch of her legs. I can only say she must have accumulated enough good karma in her past life, meeting me, someone who has a way to save her. But just then, a sudden low growl of a beast came from the cage beside me. When I lifted the green cloth covering it, I realized that, it turned out that the one locked in the cage was a barbarian girl who had been captured for auction before me. But what I want to join is still the Hound Knight Order from my past life. So I casually found an excuse and sneaked away from here, because I had another important thing to do. The scene shifted. I arrived at the auction's hidden warehouse underground, and his ruler happens to be my uncle. The efficiency is remarkable. It's actually because he has set his sights on my strength and wisdom, no matter the cost. He wants to recruit me into the Bit Hound. The underground black forces are no match for me. To improve the efficiency of handling illicit transactions, I took out the special whistle I asked my father for. Once the signal is given, a Shadow Knight order called the Bit Hound will appear immediately. This kind of hellhound of a Bijan level, he can eat over 100 every meal. Only when the gluttonous arrow fills his belly, can he unleash all the power that the demon possesses. At this moment, I wield my sword freely. This is an ancient weapon possessing human consciousness. It not only has to parasitize a human body to survive, but also requires regular feeding. This is because it was forged from the body of the strongest demon, Tao Tai. And thus, the sword naturally inherited its gluttony and greed, preparing to loot the vault here. But just then, the heavy breathing beside me caught my attention. When I lifted the green cloth covering the cage, inside was the soccer girl who had been auctioned just before me. That was to get me to join them after I was sent to the battlefield. They wanted me to join their pitbull knights. But I wasn't interested, so I made up an excuse and left. Then I went to the circus's underground warehouse. I indicated that this person didn't need to die. We would still need his assistance for many things in the future. Standing next to me at that moment was my uncle, who was also the leader of the pit bull knights. This time, him rushing to help me as a knight had ulterior motives. With a single command from me, the pit bulls began to deal with the fish in attendance. At that moment, one approached behind Baron Bino's assistant. Just as he was about to strike a fatal blow, I immediately ran over and stopped him. And there was more than one. They all picked up their weapons, waiting for me to give the orders. The newcomers were the Baskerville family, the Knights of the Bulldog clan. Aside from the silence, nothing else happened at all. However, just when the auctioneer thought I was bluffing, the next second, his neck sprayed watermelon juice. I saw a mysterious figure wearing a hat appear. Long before I came here, I got a whistle from my father. Then I blew as hard as I could. The deafening sound seemed to echo across the whole world. But a minute after the sound ended. But what happened next made me burst into laughter. Go actually wanted to risk his life to protect my escape. It seems that his loyalty is truly 100%. After that, I told him there was no need to act excessively. So he immediately grabs the opponent. He threatens me to stop at once. Otherwise, don't push him to go all out. I don't care about this at all. Emotions can't threaten me in the slightest. No one can stop me. Even the strongest muscle man here is defeated by me in an instant. The auctioneer understands. If this continues, there's no chance of winning. He remembers that I'm here for go. But it ruined his life. Even if it costs me my life today, I must take him down with me. But they still underestimated my strength. This time, I can finally indulge in the thrill of killing. At this moment, I took off my wig. He then said to the people below, the circus is really fitting for today's occasion. As for what's next, none of you here should expect to leave alive. The auction incident started with the new governor's greed. To stop him from harming the poor any further, I grabbed his back with one palm. With the infusion of magic, his blood vessels couldn't withstand the pressure and exploded. After dealing with Baron Bino, then, I stomped on the floor, and magic poured out. The seat exploded immediately. Baron Lino was also sent flying by the impact, watching the fallen, struggling vampire fatty. But I raised my hand. Baron Reno thought I was asking him to help me unlock the chains. But in the next second, as I exerted force, the chains instantly shattered. I was ultimately acquired by Baron Bino at an exorbitant price of 6 billion. I don't even know if he's being twisted like a koan. Just looking at me, he was panting and drooling. He also mentioned that he had already thought of many ways to play with me, but I didn't pay him any mind. If he steps on a landmine, the loss will be huge. After all, the auctioneer won't make a losing deal. Seeing this, Baron Bino immediately scolded him, but ignoring the assistant's advice would be his lifelong mistake. After the wooden hammer struck 3 times, 60 billion is nothing but normal for him, based on the hype value of this product. If he sells it, he could definitely double his money or more. At this moment, his assistant advised him to be cautious. He found out that he was actually the head of the granary district, Baron Bino. It is rumored that he has recently acquired several underground projects, absorbing a large amount of funds. Now his net worth has squeezed into the top 10 of the rich list. The crowd dared not raise the bid any further, fearing that he might be the invited Mr. Tony from the organizer. As long as he dares to continue raising the price, he will immediately stop. This is to obtain a higher bidding amount. However, when seeing the true face of number 99, who was completely surrounded, a female noblewoman had already raised the bid to 600 million. But in stark contrast, the bid from number 99 next door was 6 billion. The auctioneer was stunned, frozen in place after hearing that. At this point, the final price was essentially determined. The auctioneer promised that the upcoming items would be rare and unseen this year. Then he decisively sent me on stage. Under the allure of my stunning beauty and the rarity of my unique eyes, the nobles on the stage began to stir restlessly. Before the auctioneer could finish introducing, the muscular man saw this, and landed a swift punch to his stomach. He knocked the barbarian girl out cold. After dealing with this unwanted merchandise, to reassure the nobles and apologize for the disruption, noticing that the nobles were completely ignoring him, helplessly, he signaled for the barbarian girl to be temporarily taken away. Suddenly, as if sensing her chance to escape had vanished, the barbarian girl became agitated. She let out a terrifying growl toward the nobles on stage. The nobles present were still reluctant to bid on this Manchu girl. After all, her innate wildness is hard to tame. If things go wrong, it might cost the entire family's lives. Seeing this, the auctioneer had no choice but to offer another round of soul-soothing words. He then set the starting price at 1 million. A battle-type Manchu girl from the red and black lands. As long as she can be completely tamed, she would be an extremely reliable bodyguard. The starting bid was set at 5 million. Even though that was dozens of times cheaper than a hell rhino, the nobles, seeing such a rare item, raised their paddles and bid against each other. In the end, the hell rhino's final selling price was 2.5 billion. As the deals continued to go smoothly, the auctioneer decided to put up for sale a product that had been in stock for 2.5 years. Soon, the slave auction officially began. The first to appear is the A-class magical beast, the hell rhino, which has 19 hearts. Its skin, bones, and horns are all top-quality materials. Thus, the auctioneer set its starting bid at 1 billion, which are quite rare. I quickly caught the eye of the auctioneer. Moreover, I had a special invitation in hand, so not only would I fetch a good price, but the buyer would also be one of the top 10 wealthiest tycoons. In this city, 80% of the people will become slaves, while only a few nobles enjoy the privileges of the rulers. To expose the dark power organization behind the scenes, I personally disguised myself as a slave to blend in. Due to my hair color and eyes, although the sign says it only involves monsters, it actually includes some slaves or the poor. In order to overthrow the dark power organization behind it, my plan is to have Go as the seller, while I pretend to be a slave for sale. So I reminded Weiqi that he would be participating in another plan, and must give his best effort. The scene shifts, and we arrive at the place where monsters are traded. With all that, the people I detained will definitely be released, but I also didn't guarantee whether the people being released would remain completely unharmed. From that point on, almost no poor people have violated the law. Now it's only the nobles left. Even the governor will have to release them. These people guessed correctly, but only half right. Those native families not only came to apologize in person, but even offered a large amount of gold as hush money. Some people believed in my rule. After all, I could easily squander 10 billion gold coins without hesitation. Punishing a few lawbreakers was no big deal. Others thought I was just following a script. As long as the higher-ranking members of the native families show up. And now, what I'm about to do, I used these tools to make those nobles who refuse to confess their crimes experience torture, bringing them hellish pain. Afterwards, this quickly spread as a rumor. He also mentioned that in 30 years of conducting trials, he had never seen such cruel tools. At first glance, he felt nothing but the urge to vomit. At that moment, a bald man suddenly walked in. He was the judge of this prison. The various torture tools he brought were commissioned by me. I sent him to create them. The Go player beside me also advised me not to go too far, but if he had gone through what I did, he wouldn't say such nonsense. However, the punishment isn't over yet, because there's something even more exciting waiting for these guys later. He shouted that once he gets out, he would take my head. I casually said, I'll just feed them to the piranhas. That way, even if the King of Heaven comes, there will be no evidence. Instantly, the cage was filled with cries for mercy, but they underestimated my strength. Today, I'm going to teach this disobedient group a lesson. After the fight, I locked them all in the cage. I saw that the guy with the yellow hair still had some arrogance. That regardless of whether the answer is known or not, I will still give him a good beating. Because the purpose of my visit today is to eliminate this local autonomy association. After hearing this, they no longer held back. They thought their numbers were enough to crush me. Why I suddenly resorted to violence. If you don't know, then expect to meet the same fate as him. And in order to avoid being hit, the others naturally explained the situation clearly. But what he doesn't know is, I even kindly reminded him, even the most loyal dog cannot completely obey its master. After I step on the red-haired one, I will ask the others, and request another replacement. Clearly, I know he is just making things up. Since that's the case, I have no choice but to take action. Immediately, I threw a punch at the red-haired guy's abdomen, saying they wouldn't dare do that at all. The purpose of inviting me here was actually to test my integrity. After all, this city is quite corrupt at the moment. If the newly appointed governor is easily bribed, then they will protest to their superiors. According to the memories of my past life, people like them just enjoy bullying the new governor. The red-haired one stammered, not knowing what to say. Seeing this, the blonde immediately responded to my inquiry. With the current strength alone, even if all of them, at ultimate expert level, joined forces, they might not stand a chance. Then I went over to the redhead, and asked him if he brought me here just to cover today's expenses. Couldn't withstand it and burst open. After all this commotion, they finally realized the seriousness of the problem. This time, they really messed with the wrong person. While it's true that the new governor is only 15. Seeing this, a few of them not only ignored me, but even started chatting among themselves. I slammed my hand forcefully on the table. Immediately, I released 40% of my magic power. In an instant, hundreds of glasses of red wine. In just the blink of an eye, I bent his arm 90 degrees. Then, I strode forward, and told everyone that I was the new consul. So I questioned them about why they called me here. The red-haired one nearby noticed something unusual, because a stranger entered the room. The waiter, after learning that none of them knew me, grabbed my head and tried to force me out with violence. But in the very next second, he mentioned how he once had a conflict with a family, and Baskerville surprisingly backed him up. They even went all out against the other side, and personally wiped out their entire family. But just as they were discussing the new governor's background, as soon as I arrive here for the appointment, they will threaten me with the lives of thousands of ordinary people, forcing me to pay for this enormous expense out of my own pocket. At this moment, the leader with the yellow hair mocked the Baskerville family, saying they were just dogs that only know how to jack up prices fivefold. The people at the association are leisurely partying to celebrate the inauguration of the new governor. Both the drinks and the beauties are being ordered in abundance. Although they are indeed wealthy as rich kids, in reality, all of this is prepared for me. We must root out the hidden dark forces behind it. However, before I could take action, those claiming to be from the Regional Autonomous Association couldn't contain themselves. They even took the initiative to invite me. Meanwhile, you'll immediately get a reward of national gold coins, because in regions with vast wealth disparity, the number of poor people forced to violate the law is simply outrageous. But all of this is caused by the improper businesses run by those rich people. So, to achieve a stable and prosperous nation, it's actually just a promiscuous entertainment clout. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth lifted slightly. Looks like this group of insects is already getting restless. This is a stick worth 10 billion. As long as you can pull it out as required. A servant suddenly reported that people from the regional association invited me to attend an important meeting. However, as I rushed to govern, I didn't know the regional association was an organization formed by 7 cunning indigenous families. Although the sign says it's self-made, it was quite unexpected, so they asked me why I was able to investigate such a surprise. I pointed to my nose and said I didn't investigate at all. I relied on my nose to smell it out. But just then, these locations are where the black forces are situated. Looking at the map, Vichy was astonished. Although he was aware of a few of the forces, there were still so many others. He even swore to the heavens that he would always stay right behind me. However, I told Vicky not to celebrate too early, because the real battle has just begun. Immediately, I marked dozens of X's on the map. From the very beginning, when he saw me, he looked down on me. But now, on just my second day in office, I have achieved such good results. He truly admires me, because this method was implemented by the previous leader, Cam. But due to his volatile nature after coming to power, even though he established this law, he never gained the love of the people. Suddenly, Vicky covered her eyes and burst into tears. This is the benefit of following special decrees. In the days that followed, the number of people in the city violating the law has decreased from 80% to 50%. However, this is not the result I wanted. What I want is 99%. I indeed took out a bag of gold coins, but this is not all the money. The rest will be delivered to him by the guards within today. Then I patted the little girl's head, and told everyone, there was no way they could save the little girl. And out of fear, he shut his eyes tightly, silently awaiting execution. Who would have known that the next second, it will be particularly uncomfortable. So I pretended to reach for the accessory at my waist. Everyone, upon seeing this, held their breath. At this point, but even the people in the audience were frozen in place. I could feel the killing intent all around me, because I knew, when people's expectations are at their highest, they suddenly drop to the lowest. He squatted down, gripping the stick tightly with both hands. Unexpectedly, he only applied a little force. He just pulled it out. At this moment, not only was the little girl confused, instruct the little girl not to dawdle. Since you're on stage, you must abide by the rules. Otherwise, you will face severe penalties. And he couldn't care less about that now. If it's really like what others say, the reward money is fake, and she would be executed, who would take care of her mother? This is a serious matter. Now, her mother is seriously ill, and urgently needs the money, so this time, she must fight for the opportunity. Looking at the weapon at my waist, the girl fell into deep thought. At that moment, a little girl raised her hand. She told me that she wanted to give it a try. An elderly person beside her advised her not to do something foolish. As the saying goes, a fool has his luck, will be rewarded with 10 billion gold coins. Immediately, everyone in the square gasped in awe. After all, 10 billion is 400 times the average monthly wage. They began to suspect I was targeting the root of greed and corruption. It was never really possible to give that much money. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, I suddenly exerted force, and drove the stick into the ground. This was the prelude to my new decree. The first special decree, whoever can pull this stick out. Weiqi immediately reprimanded those who made random comments. A few of them immediately closed their mouths upon hearing this. Honestly, I really want to give this position to Weiqi. It would be much more useful than me speaking under this blazing sun. Then I took out a wooden stick. At this point, the people in the audience didn't believe it. Their past experiences told them otherwise. The new appointee is just putting on a show. In the end, they just end up giving up and not doing anything. At this moment, I am explaining the decree that has already taken effect behind me. It signifies that it will continue to be enforced in the future, and it will be even stricter than before. If there is anyone who defies the decree, they will be held accountable to the fullest extent. I gathered everyone in the city center. They looked at the young, inexperienced governor. The crowd made scornful noises, but I couldn't care less. Today's emergency meeting was held just to convince them. The things I blurt out probably won't make many citizens happy, so I must stage a performance. Make everyone living here obey me. The next day arrived. I instructed the Go board to issue the notification of the new decree. I wouldn't change the existing decree, but would formulate a new one based on his premise. I also promised to eliminate all improper businesses within a specified period. However, due to my young age, I'm looking at the various clauses in the legal document. Almost every one of them has minor loopholes, which has led to the rise of many illegitimate businesses. Even underground criminal organizations operate above the law. I told Vicky, in this city with a huge wealth gap, he is the most vivid representative of the poor. No matter how much he wants to change the current situation in the city, he is constantly stabbed by the wealthy who collude from the shadows. Meanwhile, but now it's my turn to be the governor. This city will be revitalized. It will become a first-tier city in Baskerville. Standing beside me at this moment is my future assistant, Vicky, and pulled out the wooden stick stuck in the ground. Then she received a reward of 10 billion gold coins. And after I arrived in Baskerville, the most corrupt city, the people inside have basically lost confidence in life. Even the governors have changed 70 or 80 times in a month. It's because they have a special law, no matter who it is. As long as they follow the laws set by the country, they can gain supreme wealth. And the little girl in front of me followed the governor's instructions. I can't forget the feeling of losing my head in my past life. Damn Hugo, just you wait. I'll make sure you experience that feeling for yourself. 99% of the people in this world are rich second-generation heirs. For now, I'm not sure if I'm capable of being this consul. Though, this is definitely a good thing for me. I can use this to hone my skills. But I'm not interested in politics at all. Anyway, my authority as consul will greatly increase. It might even surpass that of some pure-blood children. Upon hearing this, my face instantly darkened. Let's talk about this later. The butler decided to tell me something sincere. Because of my exceptional talent, the head of the house thinks highly of and values me. He hopes I can give my all to complete this task. After all, before going to the battlefield, I still need to borrow a large sum of money from my father. I thought he would ponder for a while before making a decision. Unexpectedly, he stamped the document without hesitation. He even said he trusted I wouldn't do anything foolish. As I was about to leave, he no longer looks at bloodline. Instead, he looks at accomplishments. At this point, my achievements have long surpassed those of the 18-year-old hound. That's why my father is giving me this special treatment. But before I can assume the role of this consul, this was the only treatment I received. There was no way I could enjoy the management and training of the elite class like the legitimate children. I never expected that the next wish my father proposed would actually be part of the elite class. And he even decided to let me give it a try. It seems that my father has truly changed in this life. Become a qualified hunting dog. But my father's words left me unable to calm my emotions for a long time. In my past life, for 40 years, I was either on the battlefield or carrying out assassinations. As a bastard child, the scene shifted. My father, whom I hadn't seen in 7 years, was sitting right in front of me. I quickly noticed something strange, so I asked him about the scar on his face. He touched his face. The butler suddenly appeared. and happily told me that my father was looking for me. At that moment, I already had the answer in my heart. It was my first mission at the age of 15. I was sure of it. Although over the past 7 years, I've only advanced from low level to ultimate. Compared to my former self, this already surpasses the strength I had at 40 in my past life. At that moment, there are 7 major night orders. Each night order has its own responsibilities, such as reconnaissance, defense, assassination, and so on. After much deliberation, I chose the Hound Night Order from my previous life. Now, I have reached the ultimate master level. One must always remain highly vigilant, because death can occur more easily than imagined. After both sides completed their final salutes, they began to choose their future development direction. In the Baskerville family, as of now, 7 years of training had come to an end, but the instructor still reminded them, the difference between wild bulls and bears and those kept in cages is quite significant. So when facing any monsters that have been defeated before, after a 70-minute siege, the bull bear finally exhausted all its strength. All that was left was to face the slaughter by the hounds. With this hunting experience, each of them had reached the lowest level of expertise. It was supposed to waste away in the remaining years. Yet, unknowingly, it has become my little fanboy. Now, it can play a significant role in team operations. Originally, its strength was not bad. I just forced it to change its evolutionary direction. I could tell they had become qualified hunting dogs. At this moment, they were working together to hunt an A-grade bull. This is the last exam that determines whether they can graduate smoothly. Meanwhile, the trident that I once shattered and tripped over should have lost itself. The competition set the ripple for family peace and coexistence. 7 years passed in the blink of an eye. On the training grounds of Baskerville, the once naive child had transformed into an ambitious teenager. Looking into their sharp eyes, I shot him a disdainful glance. After all, he would never expect that relaxing his guard upon seeing my broken sword would be the biggest mistake that caused his defeat. At this moment, Camus's face was flushed. Unknowingly, I had only known them for 2.5 minutes. Little did I know, this was the final step in completing my plan, only to see my father and Camus just a step apart. At this moment, Adolf is mumbling about my lack of strength to marry his niece. The kettle above my head surprisingly started to leak. This means I have passed this strength test. The next second, a crack actually appeared in the magic shield. For this, Adolf admired my focus greatly. I managed to hit the same spot accurately 23 times. And after I struck the final blow, my sword also shattered under the pressure. Seeing this, Adolf urged him not to waste his effort. At this level of magic, even if he's truly a genius, but the weapon walking is still unsolvable. As soon as he finished speaking, Adolf can be defeated. If his 2 weaknesses can be exploited, he will easily let his guard down. I might even be able to kill him. With that, I raised my sword and continuously attacked the magical shield. But just as he threw them at me, Tammy scolded him for using extra magic. This left Adolf unsure of which side to take. Even so, the memories of my past life told me. It turns out Adolf had already thought of a way to deal with swordsmen. He planned to use a defense spell with a super strong shield. It was impossible for an ordinary sword to shatter him. Then he began to chant the fire spell. One by one, huge fireballs started to gather above his head. Then things will be much simpler. As long as I can meet my father's expectations, that's enough. I immediately drew my sword and rushed forward. Suddenly, Tam reminded me, I must not confront his uncle head-on. The probability of winning in a direct confrontation is 100. In contrast, an assassination or sneak attack is 50%. But I suspect my father is mostly. Considering the current strength of the Sword Bureau, only then will I accept this uneven contest. Adolf began chanting 3 magic spells. A kettle was forged out of thin air. He proudly declared that he would duel me with the kettle. As long as a single drop of water flows from it, that counts. I am very clear about Adolf's strength. I agreed without hesitation. After all, in both appearance and power, Camus is one of the top in the empire. The scene shifts. The 2 of us arrived at the arena. Camus simply couldn't accept it. Moreover, the person he liked was right in front of him. But Adolf was shocked to learn that the noble princess was going to marry an illegitimate son of mixed blood. He was the first to object. Unless I could pass his strength test. So he shamelessly asked his uncle for a family marriage. However, Adolf only cared about the ruby. He didn't consider Camus's feelings at all. He decided to have him engaged to the eldest son of Baskerville, a man 17 years older. But Adolf was the first to disagree. So he decided to personally test whether I'm qualified to be his family's son-in-law. In this world, babies are born with 8-pack abs. Not only are they as hard as steel and impervious to blades, even the girl destined to be the strongest mage was completely mesmerized by my 8-pack abs. At the same time, Adolf also realized his niece's intentions. How could someone of his high status as a teacher let her marry a half-blooded illegitimate child? If you don't want to be involved, you handed the decision-making to me, and I agreed to the proposal. If she is to get engaged, it must be to someone closer to her age, and someone whose abilities she recognizes. I suspect the person she's talking about is likely me, because since entering the room, her gaze hasn't left my desk. The two sides would arrange a marriage alliance. The eldest son of Baskerville would marry their genius, Camus. As soon as he finished speaking, Camus rejected Adolphe. She refuses to marry someone 17 years older than herself, unaware that this was actually based on memories from my previous life that I had suggested first. When we reached the corner, Adolphe found me again. He knew very well that the Baskerville strength far surpassed the Mogg families, so he decided to handle the land and ruby mine issues peacefully. After all, the focus of Baskerville is to expand the territory. However, the borders of the Black Land and the ruby mine are constantly threatened by barbarians and hellhounds. If we could borrow the power of the Mogg family, we could keep our losses in territory expansion to a minimum. Father was quite pleased with my plan. After my father's first wife died in a previous life, he completely ignored me, his illegitimate son. I could even say he treated me like discarded trash. I told him that I was planning another scheme. He warned me that whether it's a woman or a relative, as long as they pose a threat to oneself, you must retaliate. At that moment, I was suddenly alarmed, but I believe everyone at this moment would agree that Baskerville won. However, on the way back, my father still criticized me, because I hadn't put in my full effort. Being soft-hearted on the battlefield is a grave mistake. Camus' clothes were burned, leaving only the important parts, so I took off my shirt and gave it to him. The result of the match was within my expectations. Due to unavoidable factors, our duel was ruled a draw. Suddenly, a massive fireball magic appeared behind me. This was the countermeasure I thought of. To make this match end in a draw, there was no overwhelming power, and after both of us were hit by the fireball, not one to give up easily. Just then, I heard the conversation on the stage behind me, so I didn't continue my attack, but I stepped back by 1 second. Then, I flicked my fingers towards his forehead again. But even in a clearly decisive situation, Camus still used fire magic against me. I think this is probably why he could become the authoritative female fire god, stubborn and proud. To avoid hurting his pride too much, I decided to be the best actor I could be, and I controlled my strength. After withstanding my punch, the two earthen walls were also left with a small hole. At this moment, the gap in strength was already obvious, yet Camus still refused to admit defeat. Immediately afterward, he summoned 2 more walls of earth. In fact, this level of magic is simply insulting to human intelligence. You could just go around it to solve it easily. Suddenly, Camus recited the earth escape incantation. Before I knew it, a wall of earth rose up from the ground in the arena. However, I shattered it with a single punch. It couldn't hinder my attack at all. But in order to avoid hurting the future strongest mage, I merely flicked his forehead. He began chanting fire spells, thunder spells, and military tactics spells. I saw 3 types of magic attacking me at once. I mocked him, saying he should focus on one thing. Then I quickly dodged them with agile movements. I hit his face hard, making him realize that thinking he was a genius for using multiple spells was foolish. That is the joint training of the 2 major families' geniuses this year. The scene shifts. Camus and I stood on the arena. As the sound of the match bell rang, Camus raised his hand. He then let go. He also explained that the blade is just a toy for the Iron Sword family. It can't cause any harm at all. Afterward, I apologized to Adolphe and the others. My father also said we should steer the topic back to the crowd. Anyone who dares to invade our territory will be killed without mercy. However, just as the blade was about to touch, I had already anticipated it. Adolphe will take action and obtain the Ruby King, then extended his hand from their family to the Baskerville estate. The implication was to show that the Mogg family was the strongest. I immediately grabbed Camus' hand. Then I pulled out a small knife from my bag. He explained that part of the minerals should belong to their Mogg family. The Baskervilles have no right to take it all. I told him that rubies were worth less than scrap iron to us. Our ultimate goal in mining is to expand our territory. Cam decided to show more clearly who had the right to mine. Immediately, he gathered freezing magic in his hands. At first, I thought he wanted to spar with me, but it turned out he was just restoring the map of the 2 great families. At this moment, Cam was pointing at the boundary between the 2 cities, the place where the ruby mine is located. Because the girl standing before me turned out to be the most powerful mage 20 years into the future, she could even manipulate the royal family. She was revered by the world as the authoritative fire goddess. So I mocked him, saying he came all this way just to throw a tantrum. Cam instantly became enraged. Adolf began to assess the opponent's strength upon seeing them, but he didn't realize his children had already left their seats. Camu questioned why I dared to say that earlier. The ruby mine has always been bound to the magical family. I looked surprised at this moment. At that moment, a single sentence broke the tense situation. Things that don't belong to you can never be changed. I entered the room with the butler. Camu did not back down at all after hearing this. As a magical genius, he must have enough red gem mines for his magical experiments. Adolf hurriedly stopped him from continuing to argue, because a fierce beast was struggling to suppress its inner anger. It turns out that the conflict between their two families originated entirely from the mining rights to the ruby mine. Seeing this, Adolf pretended to advise his niece not to insult others like that. Fortunately, Hugo was not angry. I just think this is just the child's unilateral lack of discipline. He knew his niece had a fiery temper. I want to take this opportunity to suppress the patriarch Hugo of Baskerville. I saw Kamehameha not considering the relationship. He launched into a tirade against Hugo, calling him a shameless mineral thief. Quickly return our ruby mine. At this moment, the heads of the two families were showing off the prodigies that only appear once in a century from their lineages. Adolf took the lead, calling forth his family's genius girl, Carlo, who was also his most beloved niece. But he had already devised a plan. Whether in duels or hunting monsters, they must rely on brute force to solve their problems. Moreover, they must immerse themselves in sword forging for 25 hours a day. As time passed, the empire eventually split into two factions, the Mog family, known for their magic, and the Baskerville family, famous for their swordsmanship. At this moment, Adolf inquired, I heard that a genius was born in your Baskerville. Coincidentally, we have one in Mog as well. He then called for his niece, Camus. This is a world where everyone can use magic. Yet there is one family with absolutely no magical talent. Only then can the nation break through its peak stage. From then on, every year, children aged 8 to 15 must participate in the joint training of the two families. Although the two families did not have a harmonious relationship, there was once an emperor. The emperor once said that the Baskerville family is a family of swords. The Mog family prioritizes magic above all. Swordsmanship and magic should complement each other. However, just as I was about to hit them again, the butler found me. He informed me about what my father had assigned to me. Meanwhile, the head of the Basque family and Adolf, the deputy head of the Mog family, were discussing how to conduct this year's joint training. But to my surprise, it was because I was too cool when killing monsters. The three of them had already become my loyal fans. Suddenly, goosebumps swept over my entire body. Reflecting back on my past life, I was killed because of them. I couldn't wait to smash them right away. And combined with the super regeneration I just acquired, I am no less impressive than the low-level masters. Just then, the triplets I had bullied earlier found me. I thought they were here to settle the score with me. What matters is that my father was shocked when he saw my performance. Up until now, the strength I've shown is only that of a top expert at the construct level. But in reality, my current strength has already reached the 5th level of Baskerville. I redefined their perception with my genius. In the days that followed, my strength was simply too overwhelming. Students my age, even seniors older than me, didn't dare get too close to me. But none of that matters. Pretend that I have mastered the second strike. As expected, it turned out just as I anticipated. The force of my control perfectly sliced through the troll's thick skin, dividing its head from its body, under the incredulous gazes of the crowd. Next, I would attempt to take down this giant troll in one blow. If I failed, I would choose to give up. I could feel a murderous intent rising in my eyes. At the same time, I transferred my magical power to my sword. It was all for this moment, and struck a massive gash into its shoulder. As the troll's wound was about to heal completely, I let out a loud shout. This attracted the attention of everyone present, including my father. I finally had an epiphany. Not only can I avoid my father's suspicion, but I can also rightfully expose my greater strength. As the troll charged at me again, this time I chose not to dodge. Instead, I used Baskerville's first trap. Without raising my father's suspicion, just then, an idea suddenly struck me. What if I could stage a duel between animals? Instead of immediately killing the monster, you must come up with a precise plan. At this moment, I have found his fatal weakness. But I have fallen into another dilemma. How much power should I exert to eliminate the troll? Because I know, B-class trolls have an overpowered regenerative skill. If I can't deal a fatal blow to him, then any attack will become worthless. That's why when hunting trolls, as soon as the chains restraining the beast were released, the battle was imminent. I relied on my agile positioning, constantly dodging his rapid attacks. but I keep giving up the chance to counterattack. Originally, I thought that with my boastful display of abilities, my father would send me to a specialized school for further training. Unexpectedly, he started discussing with the butler about the troll they captured 10 days ago, a bloodthirsty and ferocious troll, and it will be my next opponent. From my initial performance to now instantly killing a C-rank monster, I am undoubtedly a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. At just 8 years old, I have grasped the first trap. Seeing this, I smiled at my father and said the orc seemed too weak. Please arrange a more challenging duel for me. With a wave of my hand, a burst of blood red, the power of color attached itself to the sword. A single thrust instantly ended the orc's life. This time, my father was completely unsettled, and I even severed one of his arms. Due to the impact of the B-class Hellhound Blizzard skill, even with high-speed regeneration, the orc was helpless. Seeing the fear in his eyes, I bet he couldn't figure out why he couldn't regenerate, even in death. After all, for an 8-year-old child, this was already beyond what he could handle, but what they didn't expect was that just as the orc was released from its chains and let out a roar, I dashed forward at lightning speed. Of course, this is not my true strength. In order to test the level I have currently reached, my father arranged a duel for me, a C-class orc that had been starving for 2.5 months. At this moment, the audience held their breath. That after my studies, I could now feel a kind of burning sensation within me. Father and the steward were stunned, frozen in place, because this meant I had entered the realm of the sword. If I had burned an important book, it wouldn't be enough to pay with their lives for 3 lifetimes. The scene shifts. I came to my father's room, and told him, then in this world, only I can break through to the 10th sword well. But just then, the guard smelled something burning and immediately ran upstairs. I rubbed my head and explained that I accidentally burned a worthless book. After hearing this, the two of them also breathed a sigh of relief. Now, I've advanced from a swordsmanship expert to the lowest rank of master. I can control my magic even more freely. It seems I'll have more than enough time to regain my former strength before my coming-of-age ceremony at 15. Then, I took a magnifying glass from my pocket, and used the principle of focused light to ignite the pursuing ambush. In that moment, I was extremely happy. I clearly felt my magical power being enhanced. In my past life, I spent 30 years and still couldn't reach this level, but in this life, I've achieved it at only 8 years old. In the spiritual world, I tried to unleash the 5th insight against the imagined enemy. It seemed that it was due to the inhumane treatment I suffered in my past life. Just once, I successfully broke through my limitations. Now, reborn, I remember the contents of those 7 pages clearly. Then I will break through the original 4th sword technique, to a level that no one in my family has reached. And after reading all the content in the book, I entered a meditative state. He unleashed all the hounds under his command, beginning to declare war on other families. Ultimately, after sacrificing most of the troops, I gathered all 7 pages of content, but I couldn't find any book that matched them. As for why no one could learn it, that's because 7 pages of content are missing. In my past life, when I found the content of the first page, my father became obsessed with the 10th sword technique, in order to find the remaining 6 pages and break through himself. Because my purpose for coming here is this forgotten book, The Hidden Pursuit. It was written by the first generation of Baskerville's rulers. It records not only the basic cultivation techniques of the sword techniques from 1 to 9, it even contains long-lost historical insights. Then I will directly break through to the 10th insight. After that, I arrived at the Wanching Library. Every book here is one I could only dream of in my past life. And at this moment, the book that appears before me is the 6th sword record, which my father recommended for me to study. But I have no interest in it at all, before I was executed. But this time, I will definitely surpass my father's highest level, because I know of a forgotten sword technique book, and as long as I comprehend its contents fully. At that moment, I began to wonder if reincarnation could change a person's character. In the previous life, an illegitimate child could only cultivate to the 4th sword realm at most. But there's no need to get too excited yet. At the moment, my father's skill has reached the 7th sword mark. He had even reached the 9th sword mark. But an illegitimate child. This is something that has never been allowed in the family's history. But the result was beyond my expectations. My father not only didn't reject me, he even recommended books on the 6th sword realm to me. It seems this time I finally have a chance to get everything I want. I then told my father that I wanted to study in the family's Wanching Library, but I was also prepared for rejection. After all, I'm not a legitimate heir. I confidently replied that for canines, chocolate is the most lethal poison. The blood bean with the highest concentration can instantly kill Cerberus. My father had no doubts after hearing this. He even decided to grant me a wish. An 8-year-old child, fresh out of the nursery, actually managed to hunt a monster that 3 adults could not kill. Soon, this matter reached the ears of the family. This was simply an existence that could overturn the history of the Baskerville family. After that, my father summoned me again. He then asked how I managed to hunt the Cerberus. Each trainee has basically managed to hunt various sea-level or lower magical beasts. As rewards, they will each receive corresponding weapons and equipment. But the giant monster that fell beside us shocked all the instructors. For a full 2.5 years. Now, my steel direct drive combined with high-speed regeneration is simply a natural match. Quickly, a month has passed. This practical test is coming to a close, with almost no casualties. But the F-rank rapid regeneration of number 3 Chow Wei caught my attention. It was then that I realized that it was at the moment Cerberus fell, that it crushed an F-rank sewer rat. Then, the greedy glutton turned its attention towards Cerberus. But what worries me is not the fear of getting a useless skill, but I want to use an A-rank monster to test my skills in battle. After the glutton fills its belly, I acquired the burn skill from Cerberus, the ability to absorb others' skills and claim them as one's own. After absorbing the upgraded Hellhound, I gained his Blood Fury skill. The skill's effect can cause opponents to constantly experience collapse, even with minimal provocation. After the absorption was complete, I actually acquired the Hellhound skill, Blizzard skill effect. Even the smallest wound can continuously spurt out enemy blood, and there are still 2 slots remaining. It seems this is the inherent ability possessed by demons. Sure enough, it's correct. He discovered the B-grade Hellhound that I hunted. I saw the sword thrusting into the creature's body. During his absorption phase, my feeling of faintness was slowly fading away. A strong feeling of hunger keeps disrupting my thoughts. I suspect it's mostly the Tai Sui at work. After all, he hasn't eaten for over 100 years here. Once I leave the cave, the Tai Sui actually leads me to run in a certain direction. The demon clan's strength will be greatly reduced. Suddenly, the beast transformed into energy and surged into my right hand. In an instant, the sword re-emerged from within my body. I can't imagine how strong I truly am in this life. But I haven't been happy for long. What the world once thought was a legend, no one went to seek it out. Until this sword was discovered by the demon clan, the world realized a crisis was approaching. But I was the first to discover this gluttonous beast. So the answer to the cipher is shadow. Immediately, I smashed the ruby in front of me with a punch. And from it emerged a Tao Tai, a creature found only in fairy tales. It said that this is a sword of evil, forged from the body of the greedy demon Lust. This is just complete nonsense. In my past life, there was no dungeon I couldn't conquer. At that moment, the contrast between light and darkness gave me a clue. This explains why the first part of the cave was so dim. He chose to give up the treasure and live in seclusion in the mountains. Because he was convinced that the dungeon was set up by demons to mock humanity. After reading this, I was left speechless. If that's the case, then without any twin siblings, I wouldn't be able to decipher the code. But to escape as one person, they must kill each other. Although he won by taking his brother's head, the red gem still showed no signs of change. In the end, he couldn't accept this fact. When they came out, there was again one person. So their conclusion is based on the fact that they are identical twins. In their mother's womb, they were considered one person. They both arrived in the dungeon at the same time. They are indeed 2 individuals. At the same time, they discovered that it was a dungeon filled with treasures. So they killed all the monsters guarding it. However, deciphering the treasure's inscriptions took them a full 3 years. Before entering the dungeon, there was one person. After entering, there were 2 people. Then I picked up the letter that had fallen to the floor. This person also belonged to the Baskerville family. The purpose of writing this letter was to warn future generations not to make the same mistakes as he did. One day, he went hunting with his brother. They unexpectedly stumbled upon this bottomless cave. But at that moment, a beam of blinding light suddenly shot out from deep within the cave. I deduced that must be the location of the dungeon, and sure enough, what appeared inside was a red gemstone radiating magical power. This caught my attention towards the skeleton on the ground. Unbeknownst to me, dangers would strike, or perhaps mysterious treasures await my collection. Once I entered the dark cave, there were red minerals everywhere. It seems this place must be connected to Red Cone Mountain. I quickly found the dungeon hidden deep within. This place was not only filled with the scent of death, even the corrupt ground is mixed with a strange magic. It seems this dungeon has not yet been discovered and explored by others. So I gathered my spirit and walked into the cave. Although it may contain formidable monsters, it is a mysterious place filled with many rare treasures. Then I took Cerberus's essence and applied it to myself to mask my scent. I also used the Hellhound status as a dark spirit to prevent ambushes from other monsters. After that, I followed Cerberus's original path. He will surely die within 7 steps. After absorbing the energy within Cerberus, I decided to go to a certain place. Because Cerberus is the guardian of the territory, there must be a dungeon nearby that he protects. Finally, it hit the spear. He only took the time to walk 7 steps. The poison struck his heart and he fell to the ground. It seems that the legend of the 7-step snake is indeed true. Once bitten, the dog heads on both sides of the monster were the first to be poisoned and die. It seems the head in the middle is the key to supporting the body. I saw myself holding a long spear. I gathered my magic power onto it. Then, I launched it at a speed of over 180 miles per hour. And I was less than 0.001 millimeters away from the monster's fangs. In the end, it triggered the trap as it landed. Countless sharp blades pierced through his body. Soon, the blood smeared on them began to take effect. I can find a way to defeat Cerberus, because I had already set up the perfect hunting trap. In the original resting place, I could see the monster had fallen into my trap. I took a step and leaped over the first trap. Suddenly, Cerberus lunged at me with its bloody mouth. Snapping back to reality, I immediately dodged. Otherwise, the tree behind me that was bitten to pieces would have been me. Guessing right, I then ran towards the iron bars in front of me. As long as I could get past him, even with the steel body granted by Hades, after taking his attack head-on, the organs in my body were almost shattered. I saw the monster getting closer. I kept reminding myself in my mind that I absolutely couldn't lose consciousness. My sword was actually bitten and shattered by him. While I was in shock, my body was sent flying by his giant palm. It was at that moment I truly realized the gap in our strength. Challenging Cerberus at the age of 8 is still too early. It seems that even though he's injured, his combat strength hasn't decreased much. I could easily crush Cerberus in my past life, and I can do the same in this one, but in the next second, launching the first attack on the monster. Just when I thought this strike would surely hit his head, Cerberus suddenly counterattacked me from the side with lightning speed. Fortunately, my reflexes are just as sharp as in my previous life. I dodged his fierce attack from the rear side. Even the frantic hellhounds can only lower their heads in awe upon seeing him. At this moment, I continuously calm my emotions. As long as I can hunt down this Cerberus, I will be one step closer to regaining the power of my past life. So, I muster my courage and swing my sword. I immediately turned around and looked closely. I saw a 3-headed dog shrouded in hellish energy behind me. It appeared right behind me. The hellhound Cerberus. Though he is heavily wounded at this moment, the 4-headed hellhound appeared terrified. It even lowered its head and kept backing away. It was at this moment that I realized something was wrong. After all, hellhounds are proud representatives of the canine species. It wouldn't behave like this in front of an 8-year-old child. But at that moment, 4 more hellhounds appeared behind me. Seeing this, I swung my sword and beheaded the previous one. I warned them that I am not someone to be trifled with. After I made this move, it can make a person's body stronger. At this rate, restoring my past life's power before the coming-of-age ceremony is not a fantasy. At just 8 years old, I have already defeated a hellhound of a higher level. No matter what, I will take first place in this practical test. So, there's only one way to deal with it. You have to attack from his lower body, rip out his kidneys. A wisp of blue energy seeped out of the creature's body. This is the energy you get from killing monsters. As long as it's injected into the hellhound's body, all you need to do is wait for the poison to take effect. After all, one blood bean can produce 100 liters of chocolate. But the hellhound's body structure is quite unique. Its tough ribs will constantly protect its heart. When they see water, they always choose to avoid it. This move can greatly restrict the hellhound's actions. And the last one is also the most fatal weakness. Including all canines, chocolate is highly toxic to them. I just need to use my dodge skill to gradually wear down its stamina. Then I took out a bottle and poured water on the ground. This is the hellhound's second weakness. Regardless of the depth of the water, I know that in my past life, I couldn't defeat it alone at the age of 18. But now, at only 8 years old, I feel no fatigue at all. Because I know the 3 weaknesses of the hellhound. The first weakness. It can only charge forward in a straight line. At this moment, my eyes suddenly brightened. I saw a pile of natural droppings appearing on the ground. There is only one type of monster that can produce this. That is the hellhound, which is classified as a danger level of certain death. Faced with such a terrifying monster, after I set up hundreds of traps around, the hunt officially began. So I stepped into the unexplored land of the crimson black. The burnt smell emanating from the surrounding branches made me certain that what I wanted was right here. Once the hindrance was gone, I immediately pulled out a handful of beans and threw them into the fire. Because in my past life, my subordinates had told me that cocoa beans can mask the bloody taste of meat. Especially the effect of blood beans is the best. And whether the rumors about me being a genius are true or false. Little did he know that everything I did was just for show. After observing me for a week, the instructor felt that I was just hiding here, slacking off, with nothing interesting to see, so he decided to temporarily go back and report the situation. Only 100 meters away from the restricted zone. Originally, he wanted to witness the true power of a genius, but everyone else was busy slashing and hunting monsters. I, however, was leisurely hiding in the shade of a tree, slacking off. A series of actions made the instructor doubt what I was really here for. That the reason for calling so many instructors this time was actually to minimize casualties as much as possible. If innocent people are slaughtered, even if one obtains the opponent's badge, points will still be deducted. At the same time, an instructor followed me to the edge of the area. As the bell in his hand rang, the practical assessment officially began. With the memory of my past life, I naturally knew where the most advantageous terrain was. Soon, some students recklessly plotted to harm their own brothers. But what they didn't know was, on the other hand, death scores 0 points. If you can take another student's badge, you will earn extra points in the end. At this time, Rove mentioned the unexplored areas of the Crimson Black Land. He suggested that everyone should only operate in the manufactured spatial areas. The head instructor is Baskerville. He stated that this assessment is quite simple. You must stay in the Red-Black Land for a full month, and hunt powerful magical beasts. Everyone starts with a basic score of 10 points for survival. It is certainly not for eating. Instead, it is to use this blood sport to assist in hunting monsters during the practical test in 5 days. As for what will happen that day, it will be an unprecedented major event in Baskerville's history. Before long, the day of the practical test arrived, but the chef still brought me the most intense flavored blood beans. Just one of these beans can make 100 liters of chocolate. After tasting it, I also found it bitter and hard to describe. This is something that no human could possibly eat. As for my reason, but what I said next left everyone baffled. I told them I didn't want the final product. I wanted raw cocoa beans, and I wanted the most bitter variety. They had never heard of anyone eating it that way. The possibility of losing doesn't exist at all. As the scene shifted, I arrived at the grain storage warehouse. The butler, upon learning that I wanted chocolate, the chef immediately brought the finest selection. To reward me, my father ordered the butler to take me to the temporary storage to pick out my favorite food. Before I left, my father reminded me that I must never lose to Jishi in the actual combat 5 days later. But what I want to say is, my father was very satisfied with my answer. The strong are revered, the weak are guilty. At the same time, this is also the family rule of the Baskerville family. My father thinks I should reflect on the harm I caused my brother. After hearing this, my expression darkened instantly. I can easily overpower all 3 of them with my strength alone. It can only show that my strength is even greater. After all, forgiveness is just an excuse for the weak who are powerless to take revenge. I have already received proper treatment. Originally, my father had high hopes for the 3 of us brothers, because whenever we showed our skills, we stood out among our peers. But things have come to this point. So he immediately replaced the steward and summoned me. Then he asked if I had crippled the triplets. I gave a positive response. According to the news I received from the priest, they were left without arms and legs. The 3 of them became silent when we met, and their once arrogant personalities turned timid. The head of the family was outnumbered 1 to 3 by me, and I was not at all inferior. He was deeply shocked. He had no choice but to mention my argument with the other young masters. Even though the 3 injured had already been treated, and physically recovered, their spirits, however, took a heavy blow. From that moment on, I only knew that in the time to come, the so-called Trident of Baskerville would no longer exist. But soon the housekeeper reported this matter to the head of the family. Originally, he only wanted to report my first-place achievements in various competitions. But when it came to the live combat test in 5 days, as for who will win, it's up to you to decide. After the 3 of them exchanged glances, they began the inhumane mutual slaughter. During this time, I didn't know what was happening. But before he could even make a move, my foot had already given him a solid blow to the nose. Seeing that none of the 3 could fight back, I picked up the dagger and tossed it in front of them, saying, "I'll give you a chance to turn over a new leaf." Dodging would be the perfect opportunity to show him my iron body, granted by the powers of Ming and Shui. My eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "Well then, let me play with you for a while." Then I threw a punch straight at De Mao's face. Seeing this, Mao wanted to stand up for them. Today, everyone must leave something behind. Otherwise, there will be serious consequences. Upon hearing this, De Mao flew into a rage. He grabbed a dagger and charged at me. But little did he know, I didn't even dodge. that they realized they had really messed with the wrong person. Just when they decided to let me go, how could I easily let this matter rest? So I bit off San Mao's finger. Then I warned the other two. Meanwhile, the two in front of me are still showing off, because they simply don't believe that humans can actually hold it for that long. 7 minutes passed. Their faces gradually turned awkward. It wasn't until 20 minutes later. They covered my mouth and nose with their hands, and said that as long as I could hold it for 7 minutes, they would let me go. They say children can be more cruel, and this saying is indeed true, so I guess I'll just play along with them. It seems I absolutely cannot endure any longer today. At this moment, Dumao drew a dagger and pointed it at me. He heard that I had spent a full 40 minutes in the river of the dead, and wanted to verify it personally. Then they called San Mao. They grew up to be known as the Trident of Baskerville. My death is inextricably linked to them. It was they who slandered me for colluding with the demon ancestor. They made me bear a crime that I should not have, in order for the three of them not to interfere with me in 10 years. Because of this, I was also seen as a monster in my family. The three yellow-haired guys next to me were the ones who had been bullying me for a long time. Whenever class was over, they would beat me up under the pretense of being my older brothers, according to my past life memories. After undergoing the baptism of the underworld, I not only obtained a strong body, but my intellect has also surpassed that of Einstein at his peak. And since I was born, I could dominate two venomous snakes. I have already begun to enter the learning stage. Although I have experienced all of this once before, hearing that my father, at the same age, had already reached the realm of a master, I still felt a bit of pressure. It seems that I must regain the powers I had in my past life before the coming of my coming-of-age ceremony. All the attendants caring for the babies in the nursery were executed. As for who ordered them to act as the head of the household, that remains unknown. Only I, this yet-to-mature hound, saw through the truth of it all. In the blink of an eye, 8 years passed. The attendants who had come to collect my remains were all startled by the scene before them, because I was not dead from the snake bites. Instead, they were perfectly ignored, and spent the whole night with their mutilated bodies. From that day on, I felt no fear whatsoever. Instead, I firmly gripped them by the neck. Then, using the steel teeth grown from the manhwa water, I tore them apart bite by bite like spicy strips. Soon, morning arrived. It seems someone is jealous of my talents. They want to take the chance to kill me before I grow up. But my life is in my own hands, not fate's. I will not fall easily before completing my revenge, facing the swift attacks of two venomous snakes. However, she does not say a word. I just put the treasure chest on the bed and left the room. I curiously examined what was hidden inside. Unexpectedly, the treasure chest opened on its own, and two venomous snakes with gaping mouths crawled out. Make Baskerville completely vanish from the stage of history. When I wake up again, I find myself sent back to the nursery. Unbeknownst to me, an unknown danger is slowly approaching. I see a maid approaching me with a treasure chest. Even though I had lost consciousness, I still managed to seize all the power of MANHUA. Next, he would witness the birth of another self. But my ultimate goal is not to become someone as despicable as him. What I intend to do is personally destroy my own family. He shouted that I could come up now. Seeing that I didn't respond in time, he immediately reached out and pulled me out. My father, upon seeing this, had a wicked grin on his face. No wonder he is my Hugo's child, afraid that with the slightest mistake, I would drown in the water. They kept urging the family head to pull me out quickly, and at that moment, father realized that he must not miss a once-in-a-century genius. I won't surface easily. 40 minutes have passed quickly. The father on the shore revealed a chilling smile. It was as if he saw his former self. But the attendants next to him grew restless. Has already led to such dramatic changes. To absorb power faster, I drank over 10 kilograms of Styx water, even though I'm currently drowning. As long as there's a sliver of consciousness, and I will claim all the power bestowed by the river Styx for myself. As the river water constantly stimulates my wounds, I feel no pain whatsoever. Instead, I feel an endless stream of power flowing into my body, just a few minutes ahead of everyone else. They can gain a body of steel. In my past life, because I was an illegitimate child, I was ostracized by my direct brothers. I couldn't obtain this power. This time, I will be the first to arrive. I died a tragic death during the family's peak. Now, in my reincarnated life, all I think about is revenge. Even though I'm just an infant now, I have the chance to gain power early. Legend has it that if a child is soaked in the river Styx, but just as I returned victorious, ready to receive honors, my father sent me to the guillotine with his own hands, simply because my power threatened his status. And I learned secrets I shouldn't have known. In the end, I was accused of colluding with demons. So this is the Baskerville family rule. But first, one must climb the blade cradle filled with swords barehanded, to earn the right to bathe in the waters of the bright river. In my past life, I was the most powerful hound of the family, once single-handedly defending against the demon invasion. Unable to hold back his anger, Choi Jin-kyun had to leave. He declared that he would make Choi Ah-ling pay for it this weekend. Children in this world are ruthlessly thrown into the water at birth. Only a small number are able to survive, and those who are chosen will gain the power bestowed by the Mingi River. This enraged Choi Jin-yeon even more. A mere commoner dared to speak so rudely. Jin Juha could only feel speechless. Why is it always about encountering arrogant people? After saying that, he told him to get lost. He urged Choi Yeryong to give up on the family's selection test that weekend. However, Choi Yeryong firmly refused. Just as Choi Jin-yeon was about to lose his temper, Kim Ju-yuk interrupted him. Kim Ju-yuk pointed at him and started cursing. Unwilling to sit back and wait, Rodial immediately decided to take action. He hoped to get his father's support. On the other side, Jin Ju-hui, after leaving the office, quickly tidied up and headed to the training room. But as soon as he reached the door, he ran into Choi Yali, who was blocked outside. Choi Jin-yeon arrogantly humiliated her, saying that no matter how hard an illegitimate daughter tries, she can never defeat him, the eldest son of the Choi family. With that, a single strike sealed Desera's throat. Seeing that things had been exposed, Rodial was extremely anxious at this moment. Audrey would eventually drive him out of the family. He just didn't dare to take action now due to public scrutiny. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to indirectly admitting that the attack was related to the Bentrick family. The Bentrick family would reduce his sentence to 5 years. Useless fool. But suddenly, a voice in his ear filled him with terror. A shadow appeared next to him. An elite doesn't need a worthless fool like you. Meanwhile, on the other side, Desila is also being escorted to the Tower of Prism in the North Pacific. It's an elven tower personally built by the holy figure Lessa's glory of nothingness. But Desera remained completely unperturbed. As long as he didn't say Rodell's name, killing me would only prove that you're involved in this. Besides, you alone. The woman, left speechless, can only be relieved to leave. But after throwing harsh words, she will definitely make Kim Ju-hyuk regret what happened today. Unexpectedly, Audrey suddenly changed his attitude, and humiliated Kim Ju-hyuk, like an insignificant ant. Even if he was killed on the spot, no one would care. But it seemed that Kim Ju-hyuk had anticipated this. He stated that the instigator of the attack, Desera, had already been expelled from the family, and he denied that he was under Lodal's control. So this matter has nothing to do with the Bentrick family. But faced with such an unreasonable demand, Kim Ju-hyuk was clearly dismissive. However, Audrey's purpose was not to apologize. Instead, he demanded that Jin Juha clarify that the attack had nothing to do with the Bentrick family. To this end, he confidently offered to fund his path to becoming a hunter. It turned out that 3 days ago, Audrey had held a press conference. Not only did the man beat the young master of the Holy Seat family to the point where even his parents wouldn't recognize him, but he also publicly exposed the attack against him. As a result, the Bentrick family across the entire Western European continent faced backlash from 6 billion people online. They were pressured by public opinion. The head of the Bentrick family decided to visit Jin Juha. A flash of a blade, and blood began to show from the assassin's neck. In front of him stood a puppet holding a dagger. The man said that those who have lost their way do not deserve to join the elite. As the assassin breathed his last and fell to the ground, the man's figure slowly dissipated. No matter how powerful a contract holder is, they will be turned into a mortal and imprisoned once inside. The assassin wasn't too panicked about this. He knew that at most, he'd only be imprisoned for 5 years for what he did. After serving his time, he could still return to his old ways. But just then, at this time, inside a transport ship, a killer hired by Lodier was trapped here. Having lived in darkness for many years, he understood very well. This time, the destination is the Prism Tower, known as the Death God's Prison. It is a space created by an S-rank sanctum. In order to put an end to this matter completely, he decided to have his father monitor Lodier's actions, while he went to meet this legendary high school student. Facing the head of the family's false greeting, I scoffed as if to say, just get to the point. Obediently taking the reprimands like a dog, the head of the family understood one thing very clearly. If he expelled Rodier from the family now, no one would believe that the assassination incident had nothing to do with him. In that case, he would earn a reputation for hypocrisy, but rather a mercenary acting on a whim to challenge them. It had nothing to do with their family. After quietly donating 1 billion banknotes to the school, this matter was slowly suppressed. At this time, Rodier was kneeling in front of the head of the family, to ask if they knew any big journalists. I took this opportunity to post about the incident online, making the reputation of the Trick family plummet. The head of the family explained at the press conference that this was not Lodal's doing. I decided to use it to report Rodier, asking someone to harm a classmate, to ruin his reputation. After thinking it over, so I called the evaluation teacher. Look at his disdainful expression. I still decided it would be better to let him be quiet for a while. Talking too much has become a bit annoying. After understanding everything, I picked up the self-incriminating recording of the boy I had just made. The organization serves a being known as the Holy Ancestor of the Blade Behind. Everyone in the organization can sign a contract with him. They gain the power of the Holy Seat. If you had given me 2.5 more minutes to gather magic earlier, you would be the one lying down now. Then the boy confessed everything, saying that he came here to take me out, because Lodi had offered a handsome reward for it. After being expelled from the family, I joined an organization called Elite Species to survive. On ordinary days, various requests can be accepted. After I hung up the phone, I restored his right to speak. Then I grabbed his left hand and twisted it forcefully backward, indicating that he should say whatever I ask next. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that your leg down there will remain unharmed. Burn a little paper doll. It must be a rare item. Also, I know you can't stand me, which is why you asked him to find me. In a few days, I will buy some wreaths to visit you. You must wait for me. And another man's voice. Do you need me to translate? After all, he has dislocated his jaw now. It seems he can't speak clearly. What he means to say is to remember to buy 2 more incense sticks tomorrow. At this moment, in a luxurious villa, Loder looked at the long-awaited incoming call prompt. He immediately answered. He asked if it had been resolved. What came through the phone was a series of painful screams, followed by a punch to the face. The purpose of doing this is just to shut him up for a bit, because I know very well, he crossed the border this time to find me. It definitely isn't just about challenging me so simply, and delivered a side kick to his face. Mocking you, asking if you've lost your mind. Did you really think it would be like in other comics, where you have to wait until you're fully charged, and then clench your right hand, to solidify his own position? As soon as we met, he used his throne power. The magic within him gradually manifested, just as his throne power was about to fully charge and transform. I flew right in front of him, but today, all he could do was mumble incoherently. Just a moment ago, full of arrogance, he heard the legendary tale of me, the top student in the academy. So he wanted to come and crush me, but he was overjoyed by this, because without any restraints, the boy could act even more recklessly. It didn't take long before he killed 5 sanctum contractors in a single day. Because of this, his peers called him the bloodthirster. If he could endure and reach adulthood, he would gain the family's attention, but no one knew that the boy's heart was already twisted. After killing his relatives, he was expelled from the family. His parents, upon seeing this, were terrified and broke into a cold sweat. After gaining immense power, the first thing the boy did was kill his parents. It was all to survive since childhood. His parents forced him to drink 10 bottles of poison every day. It came 3 times. With a surge of overwhelming victory, it pressed down on the overseer. The boy just drank a bottle of beverage in his dream, and the next day he woke up with 9-pack abs. An artifact that holds the magic of the era of extinction. The manager picked it up and presented it to Saint, saying, "My lord, this is the item you mentioned." Upon seeing this holy creation, his whole body instantly tensed up. Just at that moment, on the nearby teleportation platform, a black iron box appeared on it. After opening the lid, inside was the ring I had sold earlier. They asked when the ring could be obtained. They also said they're almost going crazy waiting. The administrator was also puzzled by this. In all these years, he had never seen the Holy Throne so out of composure. Meanwhile, at the underground market, the market manager was overlooking from a tall building. Suddenly, a text message sound made the manager's body shudder. It possesses divine power. A message came from the Holy Throne. I closed the door behind me and went to take on the challenge. In the end, I earned an opportunity to go out with first place. I prepared to head to the next mission location. At that moment, a man with shining eyes suddenly appeared in front of me. A classmate nearby also noticed that Dumbbell was standing there alone, so they came over to ask if they could team up. With 8 people, it would be easy to clear JF's maze. But Dumbbell immediately declined, saying, "I can clear it by myself." Because the resident said it wasn't difficult. "You just do what you need to do." Dumbfounded, I responded, "Do I also have to go in alone?" I casually said, "Do as you please. This maze isn't that hard, because what you said is all correct." I didn't expect it either. I just casually taught him a bit of swordsmanship last time, and now he listens to me without question. Then he said, "I will go first." But he just stood still in place. So I curiously went up to ask him, "Now that everyone has a team, what will a lone person like you do next?" But what I didn't expect was that he looked at me and said, "I will do whatever you want me to do." This monster-filled puzzle. The reason Yeling did this was actually because of something I said. When we were preparing to enter the maze trial earlier, everyone else was forming teams. Choi Yiling's ranking will always be a bit higher. The teacher watching from the side was also puzzled by the rankings. When training Choi Yiling as a child, she was just a timid, weak little girl. Now she dares to tackle alone. Although in the end, he was left battered and bruised, he still managed to clear it, and Lu Suyen also performed quite well. But unfortunately, he still has 7 teammates. So in terms of contribution to the strategy, everyone unanimously agrees that I will become the strongest. And the second place, Choi Aryung, is completely a surprise. After reviewing the footage, the director does not understand why he chose the same method as me, going alone to tackle the maze designed for an 8-person team. After understanding the true situation, the director helplessly stated that it seems the first place once again goes to this weak little guy. When the results were released the next day, I was surprised to find that Lu Suyen wasn't even second. Regarding my performance, everyone thought it was a system glitch, but when they checked the surveillance footage, they saw it was me. I single-handedly cleared the maze with increased difficulty, even facing the ultimate demon lord that requires an 8-player team to defeat. I pierced its skull with a single sword strike, ending the battle. In a team challenge where the average person only had 5 hours, the school beauty led her team of 7 to victory with an impressive time of 2.5 hours. The director couldn't help but praise her as the greatest genius of our time. But when he opened the leaderboard, he found my name in first place, and I completed it in just 23 minutes. In the end, we completed the deal at 1/3 of the current price. And just as I was leaving the shop, the market manager found Maurice. He was recognized by everyone as the perfect campus beauty. Yet I, the slacker who stays up all night studying, managed to win. What they didn't know was, these were just a few things I casually took from the treasury. Then I told the boss, "Sell me however much you have right now. I urgently need money now. Consider it as me helping your business. The funds will arrive in about 3 to 4 weeks. But since I urgently need money now, I asked the boss how much these things are worth." I saw Morris constantly pressing his phone to show me, only to realize there were more than 10 zeros. Yet now, there are dozens of them in the bag. As a highly reputable buyer here, I sincerely state that I do not possess so many of these items. If I want to sell for a good price after the acquisition, I can go to the auction house to auction it off. As long as I obtain any one of these items, I can sign a contract with the Holy See. I will become an unparalleled genius with divine magical power. In theory, such items are rarely seen even once in 100 years at this underground market. He casually picked up a ring and examined it closely. He was shocked by what he saw. At first glance, it didn't seem like much. But then he realized the ring was actually from the Age of Extinction. You have to understand, anything from the Age of Extinction symbolizes the existence of a sanctum. I received my own identity mask. The goal this time is to exchange for some money. He arrived at the most famous buyer here, Maurice. Then he took a bag of items from his pack and dumped it in front of him. After glancing at the items, which looked like street stall goods. So, I came alone to an abandoned cafe. Following some tips I found online, I should find a mysterious base here. It's a massive market managed by the Holy Seat. After paying an entry fee of 2 million, but it made him think I meant something else. It wasn't until he saw me tell him to relax that a series of cheerful expressions started popping up. At that moment, I understood very clearly. If I reply, he'll just keep talking endlessly. I impatiently walked toward the door, leaving the aloof school beauty standing there foolishly. After getting home, I received a message from Dumbbell. He said he couldn't train together tomorrow due to something. I casually responded with a congratulations. You really impressed me. If you become my assistant, together we can strategize for exploring the maze. You will become more popular than Kun Kun. Under the teacher's insistence. Just then, the assessment teacher suddenly appeared, caught between the two. In the middle, you asked me how I just dealt with the stone goblin. In this era where magic is revered, it turns out that in the previous assessment, I killed the stone goblin using only an iron sword. In his mind, this should have been impossible. He wanted to find an opportunity to ask me about my fighting methods. But having been pampered since childhood, how could he easily ask for help? Seeing him fidgeting like that, I bluntly asked what he wanted to do. I was still planning to go on a date with another campus beauty. Speak up if you have something to say. If you have something to let out, just do it. With the campus beauty beside me, I casually opened it. I found that it was just a single word. Moreover, the words are filled with intense hatred. Why did I casually write those 2 characters? It scared him so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. Before long, the frail campus beauty couldn't take it anymore. I also looked into the matter. The task was to go deep into the woods to Lorna's house. The next day during class, just as I was about to sleep, another girl handed me a note. After the assessment, the school beauty and I went to the gym to train. The reason the teacher reacted so strongly is that the contractor of the holy work never trains physically. They only focus on cultivating magic power to improve themselves. So my physical strength has always been poor, or run away and call for backup. And my answer has always been the same. Then I went home for dinner. I finished everything in less than 3 seconds. The teacher was left dumbfounded. I immediately started the second simulation training, facing 3 goblins in a berserk state. Generally speaking, if a normal person encountered this situation, they would either use holy seat magic to break through. To this, I simply recalled that I just needed to stab it in the belly. What I didn't know was, in their perception, only an S-rank contractor's power could be this strong. To further prove my strength, the iron sword is already in the goblin's belly. Immediately, its head begins to crack open. In the next second, it disappeared from my sight. Seeing this scene, even the teacher who had taught for decades couldn't help but ask me how I did it. I naturally had to take them. The goblin, entirely made of diamond lions, quickly swung forward. I gripped my iron sword again, leaned back, and after a loud crash, summoning a goblin. The goblin arrived at the scene. Then the teacher said that if I could deliver a fatal blow, he would give me a perfect score. For such free points, I casually responded to this. Is there an easier way? Upon hearing this, the teacher could no longer control the anger inside. He then teleported the entire class. For thousands of years, I was the first in the school to get a score of 0. Even the teacher grading the papers thought this was a form of provocation. He questioned me on the spot. Facing the high-armored stone goblin, you said the best way is to stab once. Let's start with 1,000 chest expansions and 1,000 stretches. A test paper that scared the school beauty into wetting herself. Yet I finished it in 3 minutes. I couldn't help but marvel at how easy it was. The content I wrote made even the genius school beauty want to cheat and peek. The next second, the school beauty dumbbell was standing behind me. She got straight to the point and said, "Alright, teach me how to build a tree now." I decisively refused her request, told her to start with physical exercise first. But when he looked down, he found that his lifeline was being aimed at by me. Suddenly, he thrust forward with all his might. After cleaning up these little pests, I arrived at the gym, warming up, waiting for the school beauty. They rushed in one by one like crazy, even borrowing the power of the saint warriors. Was still to no avail. Before long, my little brothers were all lying on the ground. The only one left was the sneaky blonde kid, who was about to charge at me with his sword. I am quite a bit weaker, but it's still enough to deal with this group of juniors. To stir up their fighting spirit, I provocatively said that whoever rewards me last will be cut off from their descendants. Once these words were spoken, seeing me kick him, he smiled and said, "Enough with the nonsense. Let's get started quickly." This is also my first warm-up strength training in 300 years. Although compared to before, to that, I just said, "If you're upset, just deal with it. When I was born, your dad wasn't even a tadpole." The guy next to him sneered and said, "Freshman, you need to understand. The gap between us is huge." Just then, a group of colorful-haired youths walked towards me. Leading them is a senior from the second year, who bluntly expressed his displeasure. "I've been at this age for a long time. I left the house of the holy seat. Looking at the weapon in hand is quite a headache. Even though the Demon King's power is great, it's not as easy to use as before. Summoning it has also become a hassle." Made the Demon King more certain of one thing. This whole situation should have been orchestrated by the person who became the Demon King. But due to memory loss, I completely can't remember who that person is now. After understanding everything, to which the Demon King replied that he also didn't know how it happened. He mentioned that he had received a similar pop-up as well. It allowed him to contact the selected dance after rebirth, and together we will reclaim the lost memories. Until my appearance, I should have long since retired to enjoy life, but everything I had planned was completely lost when he came along, and my weapon unexpectedly became his holy ancestor. In other words, my weapon has turned into his home. I then asked if the recent system pop-up was his doing. In that instant, I was teleported right in front of the floor 300 boss for a one-on-one duel. Every passerby must greet each other, if not for 300 years ago. Because of this family, risking being fired and potentially becoming an idiot, I decisively went straight to the second level. But at that moment, a pop-up meeting the criteria suddenly appeared, then immediately prompted that I would be moved to the room. I just laughed and responded that I would never go to the second level. If I did, I might as well win the lottery tomorrow. But what no one knew was, my mission required me to go to the third level. Just as we were about to enter, The homeroom teacher emphasized that I was only allowed to go to the first basement level. The second basement level is filled with the power of supreme holy battles. In theory, as a newcomer, just a little exposure would cause your brain to crash, turn into an idiot, stating that the conditions for my visit to the Holy See had been approved. By evening, we arrived in front of the sanctum. Due to the many secrets inside, it is protected by various magic arrays. The dumbbell quickly shook its head. It meant that it would keep its word. I will wait for you. After arriving at the office, the homeroom teacher got straight to the point. I feel he actually has potential. So I said to gather at the playground at 7 tomorrow morning. I will naturally teach you swordsmanship then. And you also lulled me to sleep. This isn't something said lightly. I know very well why I was called. So I got up and walked towards the door. Even the dumbbell couldn't stop me. I looked down, feeling wronged as I stared at the floor. Suddenly, a sentence made me look up, and it was. Dumbfounded, he was at a loss for words. He didn't know how to respond. Just then, the homeroom teacher called me to the office. There was something to discuss. Seeing that this person was indeed a sword master, but strangely enough, they were born into one of the 5 great families known for knife techniques. Why did it have to be me to teach him? So I curiously asked, shouldn't your dad be strong enough to teach you? Why isn't he teaching you? After returning to school, seeing how weak I looked, the school beauty asked if I didn't sleep well last night. Do you want me to keep you company tonight? Maybe you could teach me some swordsmanship too. You can then retrieve all the magical power previously stored. This way, you can temporarily enhance your strength, and return to peak condition sooner. It's inexhaustible. I'll find a chance to absorb it later. What appeared before my eyes were piles of gold, like mountains. As long as a small portion is taken out, it will be enough to live comfortably. But the real treasure among them is actually these black stones. These are storage stones that can hold magical power. Just pick one up to activate it. I immediately started digging. It wasn't until the rooster crowed that I finished digging through the surface soil, and saw the keyhole of the vault. Then I inserted the magic fossil into the keyhole. The surge of power allowed me to enter the vault. 300 years ago, I built a secret vault here. The reason it hasn't been discovered over the years, is because magic has discernment. Only my magic can open it. As the entrance was discovered, I clicked back with a smile, responding, no way. It's just that I have important business to attend to tonight. After 2:30 a.m., I arrived at a hillside near the school. I immediately used my magic to search the surroundings. I followed up with, if you don't have the money, then just leave. Stop bothering me every day. But just in the next second, my phone was suddenly grabbed away. I saw him pressing random buttons on the phone, and a message popped up saying he earned 1 billion. At this point, he begged, can you teach me now? Repeatedly asking me to teach him swordsmanship, to get rid of this pesky follower. I said that I could teach, but the fee is 5 million for an hour. Seeing him bow his head in silence, I still decisively refused. And the reason is that there is no reason. I didn't want to make trouble for myself. But what I didn't expect was, the next day he still followed me. On my way home after school, the school beauty, Yalin, inexplicably followed me. It wasn't until I turned around to ask what she wanted that I found out she wanted to learn swordsmanship from me. She saw that while I was killing goblins, my sword skills had already reached the level of a master. Although Yaling does have a flawless figure, killing intent, which made the school beauty even more fascinated by me. Just 2.5 minutes later, all 1,000 goblins were down. I also expressed my wish, which was to go to the Hall of Thrones. This sword is clearly just an ordinary iron sword, without any magic or swordsmanship enhancement. It easily killed the monster. To others, it seemed like a stage play, with movements graceful yet filled with, and left the protective shield alone. I saw my hand rise and the knife fall, and one by one, their arms were effortlessly sliced like tofu. The homeroom teacher saw this scene through the protective shield. He couldn't understand how I did it. It was said that if I could eradicate them all, I would be granted a wish. As long as it's from the teacher, it can be fulfilled anywhere in the county. Then I took the iron sword from behind the teacher. The homeroom teacher thought, just as expected, just as he assumed I didn't have the courage to take on the task. A mocking laugh slipped from my mouth. Seeing this, the homeroom teacher was quite displeased. They called me, the top student in the entrance exam, to the stage. With a slight smile, they said, all the monsters here. Can you handle it alone? I lowered my head in thought. I didn't answer, especially the genius, whose meat is the most tender. They immediately charged forward. Fortunately, there was a large protective barrier around. These low-level monsters couldn't break through it. Then, to establish a threat, the homeroom teacher has to establish authority. They need to demonstrate their power. Then everyone is transported to the forest, surrounded by crazed goblins with red eyes. They were all eyeing the delicious food in front of them. The Sanctum House is one of the world's top 3 hunter training institutions. The secret treasure of Waala. Only insiders can explore it. That's why I came to this school full of self-proclaimed geniuses. In classes like this, where talent is everywhere, in the final life and death battle with the Tower Lord, I fought him one-on-one to the limit, so I wouldn't be burdened by those tagalongs. Now, unexpectedly reborn, my first task is to go to the Sanctum House to search for weapons and memories. They can sign contracts with the thrones, greatly enhancing their power and talent. But what no one knows is, the supreme ancestor they revere so highly, was actually my least accomplished disciple 300 years ago. But as luck would have it, 3 descendants of the 5 great families are actually in my class. Even the homeroom teacher was sweating bullets when he saw it, because each of the 5 great families has its own guardian throne, as direct descendants and geniuses. On my first day of school, I was followed by the campus beauty. She even stole my phone right in front of me. Immediately, she transferred me 10 million. It turns out the campus beauty is the proud daughter of one of the 5 prominent families. She possesses both strength and beauty, yet I knocked her out of the entrance exam with a single punch. Blood was already visible. In front of him stood a burly man holding a dagger. Those who lose their composure don't deserve to join the elite. I saw the assassin gasp for breath and fall to the ground. The man's figure then slowly faded away. However, the assassin wasn't too anxious about it, because he knew that the most he'd get for this crime was 5 years in prison. After serving his time, he could still return to his old ways. But at that moment, a flash of a blade swept across the assassin's neck. A hitman hired by Lodiel for a large sum was locked up here. Having lived in darkness for so long, he knew very well that the destination was the Prism Tower, also known as Death's Prison. It was a space created by an S-class saint. No matter how powerful the contractor is, they will be turned into an ordinary person and imprisoned upon entering. I decided to let his father monitor Lord Lothar's actions first. I went to meet this legendary high school student. Facing the family head's fake greeting, I had a disdainful look as if saying, if you have something to say, just spit it out. At this moment, on a transport ship, if we expel Lord Lothar from the family now, no one will believe that the assassination incident has nothing to do with Lord Lothar. In doing so, I would only earn a hypocritical reputation. To resolve this matter completely, later, after quietly donating 1 billion bills to the school, the matter was slowly suppressed. At that moment, Robiel was kneeling in front of the family head, obeying the master's reprimands like a dog. The head of the family understands one thing clearly. It brought disgrace to the Trek family. The family head explained at the press conference that all this was not Robiel's doing, but rather a mercenary acting impulsively, seeking a challenge. It had nothing to do with their family. Even his second brother, thousands of miles away, quickly knelt and committed suicide. All because Lodel, a high-ranking member of the Trick family, one of the 5 major families, hired mercenaries to assassinate an ordinary high school student. Ironically, the assassin ended up being knocked down, and I took this opportunity to post everything online. After thinking it over, I called the supervising teacher. I asked if there was a well-known journalist. The Crown Prince just saw a call from his father, and immediately wet and soiled himself in fear. After understanding everything, I picked up the boy's recorded confession. I decided to use it to report Roddle. He hired someone to hurt a classmate, to ruin his reputation. If I had another 2 minutes and 30 seconds to fully charge my magic earlier, you'd be the one lying down right now. Look at that disdainful expression on his face. I still think it's better to quiet him down a bit. You're talking too much, it's starting to get annoying. He joined an organization called the First Class Breeds to Survive. Usually, various forms of maintenance can be performed, and the organization serves a deity called the Blade of the Back. Everyone in the organization can form a pact with him, gaining the power of the Holy Throne. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that your leg down there will be safe. Then the boy confessed everything. He stated that it was Lothiel who came to take a shot at me this time. He was heavily rewarded to come. After being kicked out of the family, after hanging up the phone, I restored his right to speak. Then I grabbed his left hand and twisted it back forcefully, indicating that I will ask you something next. Just say whatever. Burn a little paper doll. Remember, it must be a valuable one. And I know you couldn't stand me, that's why you sent him to find me. In a few days, I will buy some flower wreaths to visit you. You must wait for me. And another man's voice. Do you need me to translate? After all, he has a dislocated jaw now. It seems he can't speak clearly. What he roughly means is to remember to buy 2 more incense sticks tomorrow. Meanwhile, in a luxurious villa, Rodier glanced at the incoming call notification that had been waiting for some time. Immediately connect. Ask if it has been resolved. But what came from the other end of the phone was a series of painful screams, and punched him in the face again. The purpose of doing this was to make him quiet, because I knew very well that his trip across borders to find me was definitely not just to challenge me. I flew in front of him and delivered a horizontal punch to his face, mocking, "Are you out of your mind? Did you really think it would be like other comics where I'd wait for you to finish charging?" Then I clenched my right hand and wanted to come and humiliate me, to solidify his own position. He used his throne power as soon as we met. The magic within him gradually manifested externally, just as his throne power was about to charge fully for transformation. Because of this, his peers called him the bloodthirsty one. But today, he can only babble aimlessly. Just now, the proud boy heard the legendary story of my first place in the academy. After killing all his relatives, he was driven out of the family. Yet he was immensely happy about it, because without the constraints, the boy could act more recklessly. Not long after, he killed 5 Holy See contractors in one day, only because, since childhood, to survive, the parents forced the boy to drink 10 bottles of dirt every month. If he could endure this and live to adulthood, he would gain the family's attention. But no one knew that the boy's heart had long been twisted. The boy only drank a bottle of beverage in his dream. When he woke up the next day, he surprisingly had 9-pack abs. His parents were so frightened that they broke out in a cold sweat. After gaining immense power, the first thing the boy did was to kill his parents. "I am your lord. This is the thing you mentioned." Seeing this holy work, the whole body immediately tensed up, sent these 3 words. A surge of overwhelming victory pressed down on the manager. A black iron box appeared on it. After opening the lid, what was inside was the ring I sold earlier. An artifact imbued with the magic of the Age of Destruction. The administrator picked it up and showed it to the throne. The manager was also confused by this. As in all these years, they had never seen the throne so unsettled. At this moment, on the nearby teleportation platform, the market manager was looking down from a high building. Suddenly, the sound of a text message made the manager's body tremble. It was a message from the throne, who possesses divine power, asking when the ring would finally be ready. They said they were growing impatient. In the end, I won first place and earned the right to go out. I was getting ready to head to the next mission site. And just then, a man with glowing eyes suddenly appeared in front of me. Meanwhile, at the underground market, the 8 of us could easily clear the maze. But this time, the maze was harder. Yaling immediately refused, saying, "I can clear it on my own." Because he said it wasn't difficult. I went to challenge it alone before the doors closed. I casually said, "Suit yourself. This maze isn't difficult at all." A classmate nearby saw Yaling standing there alone, so they asked if they could team up. That way, and now he listens to me completely. Then I said to myself, "You should do what you need to do." Dumbbell responded, "So do I also have to go in alone? What are you going to do by yourself?" To my surprise, he looked at me and said, "I'll do whatever you want me to do. Because everything you said is correct." I didn't expect that either. I just casually taught a little sword technique last time. Was actually because of something I said. When we were preparing to enter the maze assessment earlier, everyone else was forming teams. But he just stood there, not moving. Out of curiosity, I approached and asked, "Everyone's in teams now." The teacher on the side was also quite puzzled by the rankings. Clearly, when training Choi Yiling as a child, she was just a timid and weak little girl. Now she dares to challenge this monster-filled maze alone. The reason Yiling acted this way, she still managed to clear it. Although Lu Suyen also performed well, unfortunately, he still has 7 teammates. So from the perspective of contribution to the strategy, Choi Yiling's ranking will always be a bit higher. And the second place, Choi Yiling, is completely a surprise. After reviewing the footage, the director didn't understand why she chose the same method as me, going alone to tackle a maze designed for an 8-person team. Although she ended up battered and bruised, the director helplessly stated that it seemed this time's top player was once again this kid with kidney deficiency. Until the next day when the results were released. What surprised everyone was that Lu Su-yen didn't even come in second. Regarding my performance, everyone unanimously agrees that I will become the strongest. Everyone thought it was the system. But after opening the surveillance records, it turned out I had single-handedly cleared the F+ difficulty maze. Even when facing the ultimate demon general, which required an 8-person team to defeat, I still pierced its skull with a single strike, ending the battle. After understanding the true situation, the campus bell led a team of 7 to victory in just 2.5 hours. Even the director couldn't help but praise him as the greatest talent of our time. But when he opened the rankings, he found that the top spot was my name. And I completed it in just 23 minutes. And just as I was leaving the shop, the market manager found Maurice. He is universally recognized as the perfect campus belle. Yet he lost to me, a study slacker who stays up all night. In a team challenge where everyone averages 5 hours, These things are just a few I randomly took from my vault. Then I told the owner to sell me as much as he had. I urgently needed the money. Consider it a way to help your business. In the end, I completed the transaction at 1/3 of the current price. Since he urgently needed money, he asked the boss how much these items were worth. When Maurice kept showing me his phone, I realized there were so many zeros. But what they don't know is, as a reputable buyer in this place, he sincerely said that he didn't have enough money to buy all these things. If you want to get a good price, you can auction them off at an auction house. The funds should arrive in about 3 to 4 weeks. You can make a pact with the Holy Throne, and become a genius with divine magic. Logically speaking, such items are rare, even in this underground market, appearing only once in a century. But now, there are dozens of them in the bag. He was shocked when he looked closer. He discovered that this ring was actually from the Age of Destruction. It's important to note that anything from the Age of Destruction, they all symbolize the presence of the Holy Throne. As long as you obtain any one of these items. He then arrived at the most famous buyer here, Morris. He then took out a bag of items from his backpack and slammed it down in front of him. Looking at these items in front of him, which seemed like street vendor goods, he casually picked up a ring and examined it carefully, not realizing at first, it was a massive market run by a saint. He paid the 2 million entry fee, and got his own identity mask. His purpose for coming here this time, was to exchange for some money. This puzzled me. If I replied to him, it would only lead to endless chatting. He came alone to an abandoned cafe. According to online hints, he would find a mysterious base here. He said he couldn't train together tomorrow because he has something else to do. I casually responded with a congratulations. But it made him think I meant something else. Until I saw him telling me to relax properly. A series of joyful expressions kept popping up. You would become even more famous than Kun Kun. Annoyed by the teacher's pestering, I impatiently walked out the door, leaving the aloof campus belle standing there in confusion. After returning home, I received a message from the dumbbell. He asked me how I just dealt with the rock goblin. In this era where magic reigns supreme, you've really impressed me. If you become my assistant, we could study strategies to conquer dungeons together. He wanted to find a chance to ask me about my fighting methods. Having been pampered since childhood, how could he easily ask for help? Just then, the evaluation teacher suddenly appeared, caught between the two of us. So just say what you need to. Spit it out if you have something to say. Turns out, during the previous evaluation, I killed the rock goblin with just an iron sword. In his mind, this should have been impossible. I casually wrote 2 words, what for? He was so scared, cold sweat started pouring. Look at him all fidgety. He bluntly asked, what do you want? I'm still planning a date with another campus beauty. I casually opened it, accompanied by the school beauty, and found it was just a seat. Moreover, the words were filled with deep hatred. I received a note from the aloof school beauty right after entering university, and it only contained a cryptic reference to a seat. I also checked the matter here. The task is to go to Rona's house deep in the woods. The next day in class, I was about to fall asleep, when another girl handed me a note. The reason the teacher reacted so strongly to me is that the Holy Seat's contractors never exercise their physical strength. They only focus on training their magical power to improve themselves. As a result, their physical strength has always been poor. Before long, the delicate school beauty couldn't take it anymore. She said she would see me tomorrow, and then go home to eat. After I finished everything in less than 3 seconds, the teacher stood there in shock. After the assessment ended, I arrived at the gym with the school beauty for training. Generally speaking, normal people would encounter such a situation, either using the Holy Sea's magic to break through, or running away to request support. But my answer was to take one down. In their understanding, only S-rank contractors possess such powerful strength. To further verify my strength, I immediately started the second simulation training, facing 3 goblins in a frenzy. Seeing this scene, even a teacher who has taught for decades couldn't help but ask me how I did it. To this, I simply recalled with ease, just insert something into his stomach. But what I didn't know was, the body leans back. After a loud crash, the iron sword is already in the goblin's abdomen. Immediately, the head starts to crack open. In the next second, it disappeared from my sight. He'd give me full marks for such an easy score. Of course, I had to take it. The goblin, whose whole body was made of diamond, quickly lunged forward. I gripped my iron sword again. The teacher's anger could no longer be controlled, and summoned the entire class. After summoning for a while, a goblin appeared on the scene. Then the teacher said if I could kill it with one strike, facing the heavily armored stone giant. Bryn, you said the best way is to stab him. To which I casually responded, is there an easier way? Upon hearing this, I sighed. It was too easy. What I wrote made even the genius school beauty want to cheat and take a peek. It's just that for thousands of years, I was the first in the school to get a score of 0. Even the teacher grading the papers thought this was a form of provocation, directly questioning the bento. I decisively refused her request. I suggest starting with physical exercise. Let's do 1,000 chest expansions and 1,000 stretches first. An exam paper that even the school beauty found terrifying, yet I finished it in 3 minutes. I arrived at the gym. I warmed up while waiting for the school beauty. The next moment, the school beauty stood right behind me. She got straight to the point and said, "First, teach me how to build a tree." Before long, all my underlings were lying on the ground. The only one left was the sleazy blonde kid, getting ready to charge at me with a sword. He looked down, only to find his manhood in my grip. Suddenly, I pushed forward with all my strength. After clearing away these small fees, I provocatively said, "Whoever comes up last will be cursed with no offspring." As soon as I said that, they rushed at me like madmen. Even with the power of the sacred battle, it was still useless. Let's get started. This is also my first warm-up in 300 years. Although my strength has weakened quite a bit compared to before, it's still enough to deal with these youngsters, to ignite their fighting spirit. When I was born, your dad wasn't even a tadpole. The little brother beside me stood up and silently reminded him to understand. The gap between us is huge. I kicked out with one foot, and laughed, saying, "Enough talk." At that moment, a group of young people with colorful hair walked towards me. The leader, a second-year senior, bluntly expressed his displeasure. "I've been younger for a long time." To this, I just said I was annoyed but held it in. After understanding everything, I left the Hall of the Throne. Pan was troubled by the weapon in his hand. Even though the Demon King's power isn't what it used to be, it can still be used freely. Summoning is a hassle too. My appearance made the Demon King even more certain of one thing. All of this was probably caused by the person who turned himself into the Demon King. But due to memory loss, I can't remember who that person is at all now. Then I asked if the system pop-up just now was your doing. The Demon King said he also had no idea what was going on. He had received a similar pop-up. It instructed him to interact with the reborn selected dance, and together retrieve the lost memories. The pop-up mentioned that if it weren't for 300 years ago, this guy would have long since retired and been enjoying life. Everything I had originally planned was completely gone due to his swap, and my weapon actually became his sacred ancestor. In other words, my weapon became his home. A qualifying pop-up suddenly appeared. It immediately prompted that I would be moved to the room. In that moment, I was unexpectedly transported in front of the Demon King I had once swapped with 300 years ago. Old acquaintances meet to ward off evil. Alright, but what no one knows is, my mission actually required me to go to the 3rd level, risking expulsion and becoming an idiot. I decisively went straight to the 2nd level, but at that moment, the homeroom teacher emphasized that I was only allowed to go to the 1st basement level. The 2nd basement level is filled with the trials of the supreme sacred battle. Logically speaking, a freshman like you would have their brain crash and turn into an idiot with just a little exposure. To that, I just smiled and replied, "I definitely won't go to the 2nd level. If I do, I'll win the lottery tomorrow." In the evening, we arrived in front of the sanctuary together. Because there are many secrets inside, it is protected by various magic circles. Just before we entered, the dumbbell hurriedly shook its head and said, "If you say you'll do it, I'll wait for you." After arriving at the office, the homeroom teacher got straight to the point, saying that my request to visit the sanctuary had been approved. A sudden sentence made him look up, and it was, "I feel he's actually quite a good prospect." So I said to gather at the playground at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I'll naturally teach you swordsmanship then. And the thing about you lulling me to sleep isn't just talk. There was something to discuss. I knew very well why I was being called. So I stood up and walked out. Dumbbell couldn't stop me. He lowered his head, feeling wronged, staring at the floor. Yaling was instantly speechless, not knowing how to respond. Just at that moment, the homeroom teacher called out, and asked me to go to the office. But what's strange is, he's obviously born into one of the 5 great sword families. So why did they insist I teach him? So I curiously asked, "Your dad should be really skilled, right? Why not let him teach you?" She noticed how weak I looked. The school beauty came over, asking if I hadn't slept well last night. "Do you want me to stay with you tonight? Maybe you could teach me swordsmanship." It's clear that this person is indeed a swordsman. This way, you can enhance your power in a short time, and return to your peak state sooner. There's so much left over. I'll find a chance to absorb it later. After returning to school, just taking a small portion would be enough to live in comfort. But the real treasure here is actually these black stones. These are mana storing stones. Just pick one up and activate it, and you can extract all the stored mana. I finished digging the surface only when the attack sounded. I saw the keyhole of the treasury. Then, I inserted the magic crystal into the keyhole. I twisted it and successfully entered the treasury. What comes into view is a mountain of gold coins. The reason it hasn't been discovered all these years. It's because the magic has discernment. Only my magic can unlock it. As soon as the entrance was discovered, I immediately started digging. After 2:30 in the morning, I arrived at a hill near the school. I immediately used magic to scan the surroundings. 300 years ago, I built a secret shelter here. A message popped up showing a deposit of 1 billion. At this point, Dumbbell begged, "Can you accept me now?" I swiftly clicked reject. I smiled and responded, "No way, just because I still have serious business to attend to tonight." I immediately said, "If you don't have money, then leave. Stop bothering me every day." But in the next second, the phone was suddenly snatched away. I saw him frantically pressing buttons on the phone. He kept repeating one thing, asking me to teach him swordsmanship. To get rid of this clingy person, I said he could join me, but it would cost 5 million for an hour. Seeing him with his head down and saying nothing, I still decisively refused her, and the reason was simply no reason. I didn't want to find trouble for myself, but what I didn't expect was, the next day he still followed me. That the school beauty, Yaling, inexplicably followed me. It wasn't until I turned around and asked what she wanted, that I found out she wanted to learn swordsmanship from me. When I killed the goblin, she saw that my sword skills had already reached a master level. Although Yaling indeed had a flawless figure, just 2.5 minutes later, all 1,000 goblins fell. I also expressed my wish, that is to go to the house of the holy seat. It was on the way home from school, with no magical powers or sword techniques to enhance it. Yet I easily killed the monster. To others, it was like a stage play. The movements were graceful yet deadly. This also made the school beauty more fascinated by me. I swung my hand down with the blade. One by one, their arms were easily sliced through like tofu. The homeroom teacher saw this scene inside the shield, and couldn't understand how I managed to do it. This sword was clearly just an ordinary iron sword. I would get a wish. As long as it's a teacher, it can be granted throughout the county. Then I took the iron sword behind the teacher, and left the protective barrier alone. Just when he thought I didn't have the courage to take on the task, a mocking laugh escaped my lips. Seeing this, the homeroom teacher was quite displeased. He said if I could eliminate them all. With a faint smile, they asked if I could handle all the monsters here by myself. I lowered my head in thought, and did not answer. The homeroom teacher thought, as expected. They immediately rushed forward, but fortunately, there was a giant protective barrier around. This low-level monster is unable to break through. Then, to establish a threat, they called me, the top student of the entrance exam, to the stage. Show their power. Then everyone was transported into a forest, and around them were crazed goblins with red eyes, all staring hungrily at the feast before them. Especially the genius's meat, the most tender. The House of Thrones is the hidden treasure of Valhalla, one of the world's top 3 hunter training institutions. Insiders can't explore it. That's why I came to this school full of self-proclaimed modern geniuses, especially this class with so much talent walking around. The homeroom teacher must establish authority. In the final life and death battle with the Tower Master, in order to not drag these burdens along, I fought the Tower Master one-on-one to the death. Now, unexpectedly reborn. The first task I've received is to go to the House of Thrones to seek weapons and memories. They can sign a contract with the throne, greatly enhancing their own strength and talent. But what no one knows is, that the revered ancestor they speak of, was my most unremarkable disciple 300 years ago. Coincidentally, 3 descendants from the 5 major families are actually in my class. The homeroom teacher was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat, only because the 5 great families each possess their own guardian throne, as direct descendants and gifted disciples. On the first day of school, I was followed by the school beauty. She even stole my phone right in front of me. Immediately, she transferred 10 million to me. It turns out the school beauty is a proud daughter from one of the 5 major families. With both strength and beauty, she was eliminated by my punch in the entrance exam.